We're back with another FPL video. We've got 2 double game weeks left and 3 game weeks overall until we end this campaign. So much has happened in this season and it's yet gotten so quickly. It has been a blast doing all these streams and videos. So thank you very much to those who have supported the channel, liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. All the patrons and channel members is massively appreciated. We're going to look for new goals going into next season for sure. But let's go into the best 50-man squad for the free hit. There might be a few players that you might disagree with, but I open the discussion down to the comment section below. Be sure to let me know your thoughts there, because there might be a few improvements you can make to some of my selections. I'm quite confident with the majority, but there's 1 or 2 that aren't guaranteed or essential in this game week, and you don't really need to go for them. Despite Brighton having a double, you don't need to go for a triple up in them, as we'll get on to very shortly. But be sure to smash the like button, subscribe if you're new, share this video around, all the usual stuff. Very massively appreciated as always. But let's jump straight into this video. After making a calamitous error against West Ham, which gave the Hammers a 1-0 victory, I still think De Gea is one of the best goalkeepers to get in this game week, maybe even the very best one. Now, if you are looking for a double game week goalkeeper, then I would go for Nick Pope. I think the fixtures are much more favourable compared to Brighton, and Nick Pope has a decent chance of at least 1 clean sheet in this double. So therefore, if you want a double game week goalkeeper, go for Nick Pope. But from the single game week options, I look across the board, and whilst Alisson's not a bad option against Leicester, I still think Leicester have a decent chance of scoring. And you'd also maybe want to go for Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. Then you've got the likes of Edison away to Everton. That could be a decent chance of a clean sheet, but that's still not guaranteed. And Man City could rotate quite a bit, and I wouldn't even rule out Edison being dropped to the bench there as well. It's happened recently in the Premier League in Man City's victory over West Ham. So I'd go for De Gea. Man United have a very strong home record, especially defensively. They've only conceded 8 goals, and they've also kept 5 successive clean sheets at Old Trafford. So I'd go for David De Gea facing Wolves, who are in the bottom 3 in terms of their away record. They are very, very poor. And it was less than 2 weeks ago that Wolves lost 6-0 to Brighton. Their home record is pretty good, but in those away matches, I'd always favour the home team in most cases. And with David De Gea, I think he's got a very good chance of a clean sheet. I think Ten Hag will persist with him at least until the summer. And for me, he's probably got the best chance of a clean sheet from any goalkeeper this week. And I think Man United have a pretty solid chance. You could even double up on them with maybe Luke Shaw or Dalot in the back line as well. But I'd go for David De Gea. Iverson's just there for the budget. I definitely wouldn't start him. You saw how he did against Fulham and how poor Leicester are defensively. We've said this all season, apart from that 8 or 9 game week period just before the World Cup. Leicester have been a shambles in every single other game pretty much, so I definitely wouldn't go for him in the starting 11. David De Gea, I think, is the best goalkeeper in double game week 36. This is the area of the team that is most open to change, and this is where I invite you in the comment section to make some corrections, because we all look at Estupinan. He's got a double game week, but he's facing Arsenal and Newcastle away. While Brighton did keep a clean sheet in the reverse fixture against Newcastle, I think it was in game week 2, I still don't really expect a clean sheet. I'm not that confident about it. So Estupinan isn't really the best option in general. I think he's still got a decent chance of an assist and maybe some bonus points if that's the case. But in terms of clean sheets, you could say it's very unlikely for Brighton to pick up 1 in this double. They certainly won't get 2. I mean, that would be an absolute shocker. But Estupinan has been very consistent since game week 20. He's got the attacking potential and the bonus points, and that's why I've selected him. But if you want a triple up in Brighton, my suggestion is also to maybe consider a striker like Ferguson, who's just come back from injury. But I think an even better choice still could be Enciso. The Paraguayan has been fantastic in recent weeks, and he could nail down a spot in the starting 11 for the long term as well, beyond this summer going into next season. So maybe that's the way you'd want to go about it if you don't want 3 Brighton midfielders, for example. So you go for the 2 that we're going to pick here, and then maybe a forward as well. But if not, I'd probably go for Estupinan. You don't need to start him though, and that's where the doubts will lie, and you may reconsider this, because Estupinan is not a popular option heading into double game week 36. But then again, maybe his recency bias, the fact that Brighton conceded 5 goals at home to Everton, they might shore things up now against Arsenal, but you'd expect both teams to score in that game. So let's see what happens and what's in store for us. There's certainly going to be very interesting games to watch, but Brighton still have to face Arsenal, Newcastle and Man City in the foreseeable future. So if you're also looking to bring in Estupinan, I think the main appeal is the fact that he's got 2 doubles in a row, but the doubles themselves aren't particularly great. Then we move on to Rico Henry. He's just a bench option really, facing West Ham at home. I would give Brentford the edge, but I'm not necessarily expecting a clean sheet. So Henry is just a cheap defender to make up the numbers and also to act as an enabler of sorts. I'm also going for Kieran Trippier. I think he's quite a standout option, but he's only got 2 clean sheets in his last 12 games, and he's also not producing missing enough returns. He's actually blanked in his last 5, and it's quite similar to a few other popular options heading into Double Gameweek 36, as I'll mention very shortly. But Newcastle defenders have been very disappointing. I think they'll keep 1 clean sheet potentially in Double Gameweek 36, but even that isn't guaranteed with Leeds now, with a managerial bounce. They've got Big Sam, and that could be quite a tough game for Newcastle. They might win it, but they could also concede in the process and might struggle to win convincingly. You never know, of course. You would back Newcastle, but I'd be a bit careful about triple ups in Newcastle defence, which I have seen online. I definitely wouldn't go that far this week, to be fair, and I'd rather go for 2 Newcastle attackers, and you all know my thoughts on that if you've seen my recent streams and videos. The final 2 defenders include Luke Shaw. I talked about this earlier. You can consider a double up on United defence because I think they've got the best chance of a clean sheet this week, probably even over Newcastle. The only reason why we'd mainly favour Newcastle is because they have a double, and that's simply the only reason why. But I think Luke Shaw could do really well here, and Wolves have been a bit of a bogey team for Man United recently, especially at Old Trafford, but I think it'll be a low scoring game, maybe 1-0, could be 1-1, and that wouldn't be ideal, of course, but a 1-0 would be fantastic, I think, for those with De Gea and Luke Shaw / another Man United defender. And I've also gone for Trent Alexander-Arnold. I said this as well at the very beginning, that I'm not necessarily expecting a clean sheet against Leicester, but I think Trent can be involved in a few assists, and he's also doing so well in this inverted role. And if Liverpool continue this in the long term, I think Trent Alexander-Arnold could thrive and actually find his absolute best version, which is saying a lot considering how good he was just 2 or 3 years ago. So that is my back 5. It's not the greatest, I'll be quite honest. I don't see many clean sheets across the board, and maybe I'm going to overlook some teams like Aston Villa. They could keep one at home to Spurs. They did it in the reverse fixture, but I think this is the best defensive 5 on paper. But once again, you may feel differently, and you might want to remove Estupinan and go for another Brighton player instead. So be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. And now let's move on to the midfielders. At the time of this recording, we don't have definitive news yet on Solly March. He was on the bench originally against Everton, came on, and then just half an hour later, around 76 minutes I think it was, he was subbed off due to a hamstring injury. So that is very worrying. He could miss the rest of the season. But until we know for sure, I wouldn't be selling him, and I'd wait until the next press conference we get before the deadline. And if we get any more information and clarity, that's when we can make a final decision. And we'll talk about this in the future videos. And also in the deadline stream, I've got Solly March myself, for example. And I think a very popular move this week would be selling him to McAllister, who's got 2 returns in successive games, and he's also on penalties, and he has been unlucky generally, I think, since the World Cup. So I think McAllister owners are now starting to get the luck on their side. But as a non-McAllister owner, I have to tell you right now, he is one of the main reasons why I've got successive red arrows in the last 2 weeks. But there you go, he is a quality player. He's got an eye for goal from open play as well. He can hog up the bonus points, especially when he scores. So he's a fantastic option for this double. He's relatively cheap as well. Now you might be thinking, where's the Newcastle midfielders? If you want to go that way, I would recommend either Joelinton or Willock, with Joelinton being better statistically, but Willock is someone that caught my eye against Arsenal. He got into some very good positions, almost scored on 2 occasions, and I think Willock could be very underrated in this double game week. But I am opting for 2 Newcastle forwards, and you're going to know who they are, of course, and it's something I've been discussing for several weeks at this point. And I would also go for Mitoma, who did blank 5 games in a row until the Everton game where he got that assist. And maybe Mitoma owners were a bit lucky to even get that assist in the first place because it took a deflection and hit off McAllister's head. But there you go, he got the assist, and I think he could do really well in these doubles despite the difficulty of these fixtures. And he actually scored against Arsenal in the Premier League at the Amex and almost kick-started a comeback, but he also did it at the Carabao Cup. I went to that game and Mitoma was sensational, scored a fantastic goal, placed it in the top corner, and I think he could do an extremely good job in these 2 remaining doubles of the season. So I still like him, but he has been a very frustrating asset in recent weeks. And I'd also go for Salah against Leicester. I think he's a great shout for the captaincy even. I know we tend to look at the double game week options for the captaincy, but if you were to look for a single game week option, apart from Haaland and maybe a few others here and there, I think Salah could definitely be the standout this week against the struggling Leicester side, and I just don't see how the Foxes can keep him out. The only counter argument I can put forward to that is that Leicester have done pretty well against Liverpool recently. They were very unlucky to lose the last meeting where Wout Faes scored 2 own goals, and also last year Leicester managed to win 1-0, and I think Salah missed a penalty in that game. But things have changed a lot since then. Liverpool might be worse off than they were at that point, but Leicester are just miles off it and nowhere near that level even from last season. To complete this midfield, I've also gone for Wilfried Zaha, and I think a Crystal Palace midfielder against Bournemouth could be a fantastic differential, and I would probably earmark Zaha or Eze as the best ones, but you can certainly also put forward a case for Elise. And I'd also go for Marcus Rashford, who has scored before against Wolves at home, and Bruno Fernandes is another really good option in the midfield. But I would go for Marcus Rashford, despite the fact that he's only scored twice in the Premier League since February, and I think he's got 4 goals in his last 15 games across all competitions. So Rashford isn't a nailed-on pick. You don't necessarily need to go for him or even start him, but I have picked him and I'm backing him to maybe get a goal here against Wolves. But there's a really strong midfield. It's going to be difficult to leave out 1 or 2 of these players and put them on the bench, but it might be necessary, as I'll show you later on using FPL.team. But before we get to that, let's show you the 3 forwards for Double Gameweek 36. I would highly recommend going for both Wilson and Isak on the free hit, and if you're in a position to do so with your normal team, I would say the same thing as well. But for those of you like myself, where you have to take hits to get rid of defenders in order to have Wilson and Isak, I still think it's worth it, but that would be a bit more complicated. And some of you may just say, you know what, I have to pick one and that's it. I can't go for both. If I had to pick, I would go for Isak, but Wilson does have the better stats. And despite having fewer minutes, he has been doing better since Double Gameweek 29. The reasons why I'd go for Isak is because he's better for bonus points, he's on penalties, and he's also better for expected minutes. And those are the 3 key reasons why I would go for the Swedish striker. And he also looked very impressive against Arsenal. I know he was quite quiet, but he hit the post and he also created a few chances, whilst Wilson only created 1 chance for Willock, which Ramsdale saved. And of course, that's only 1 game. And I've also seen other games like West Ham where Wilson did very well from the get-go. But I would go for Isak. I think generally he's been more impressive whenever I've watched Newcastle. But Wilson's got 15 goals and 5 assists in the Premier League this season, which is an incredible return for him. And Isak also, of course, has 10 goals, but in also few appearances. Then again, the minutes I'd say are quite similar in general, and it's a really close call between those 2. But I would go for Isak if I had to pick one of them. Now, the final forward is Erling Haaland, but you don't need to go for him, and he might be rotated against Everton. This is one of those games in the Premier League where Madrid is going to be the focus now. 1-1 going into the second leg. I think Man City could rotate, and whilst I think Haaland will start, it would not surprise me at all if I saw him on the bench. So if you were to consider an alternative striker who you want to start, I would probably put 2 or 3 names forward. I think the main ones would be Ivan Toney. I think he'll score against West Ham. And the other one would be Harry Kane against Aston Villa away. And even someone like Ollie Watkins could be a very decent shout. But I think those first 2 I mentioned would be at the very top of the Haaland replacements. And even someone like Alvarez could be decent. But I think the main one, if you don't want to go for Haaland, is Ivan Toney. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below and tell me who you're going to captain, which players are you going for from Brighton and Newcastle, and anything else that you want to discuss. Feel free to do so there and also in the deadline stream coming up. But let's now go to FPL.team, show you the starting 11 for this free hit squad, and talk about the captaincy. We have some huge benching dilemmas on this free hit, and generally people in the comment section say, why not just go for the cheapest options on the bench and that's it? You can do so if you wish, especially if you're struggling for budget. As you can see here, I've only got 0.6 million left in the bank, so this team would cost roughly around 102.7 million, so that could also play a part. But it's always decent to have one good option on your bench just in case. I'd always recommend that, but you don't need to have a really good second or third option on your bench either. So you could make a case that some of these players aren't necessary in this free hit squad. I have gone for David De Gea and a back 3 of Trent Alexander-Arnold, Estupinan and Trippier, but I would highly recommend at least considering the possibility of putting Luke Shaw in your starting 11 and doubling up on Man United defence. I think that could be a very good differential for this week. I'd also go for a midfield 4 of Salah, Mitoma, McAllister and Marcus Rashford, but Zaha is also very, very close to getting into the starting 11, and the front 3 would be Erling Haaland, Isak and Callum Wilson, and the captaincy is quite close. I think Mitoma, Trippier, even McAllister should be considered, but I'm looking at one of the front 2. Isak or Wilson for the captaincy, and I do prefer Isak for the reasons I mentioned before, the expected minutes, the bonus points and the penalties. I also think he's generally more impressive on the eye, so I would go for him as the captain and Callum Wilson as the vice, but you could go for someone else. And remember, even consider single game week options like Salah or Erling Haaland, maybe Ivan Toney if you bring him into this team as well. The bench is good, I think it speaks for itself. Iverson, Zaha, Shaw and Rico Henry. I think the main ones that are knocking on the door are Zaha and Luke Shaw. And now just to show you a few quick alternatives here. Like I said, if you don't go for Erling Haaland, that's fine. You can pick Ivan Toney instead and start him. But even Zaha could come into the side, and that's pretty fine. You could even go for Greenwood or a budget striker. Enciso is also someone to consider if you want to triple up in Brighton offence, which could be very, very impressive. I think that triple up in Brighton attack could be very fruitful. And when you look at the fixtures, you'd expect Brighton to score goals, but they'll probably leak in some at the same time. And I've also got John Stones in here, and he replaces Estupinan, but it's completely up to you which defender you go for there. All I'm saying is that a double up in United defence is viable, and I would consider that possibility. I'd also go for Kieran Trippier, and then it's up to you if you go for Estupinan, Trent Alexander-Arnold, John Stones, or maybe even someone else completely left field. But I think the midfield and the attack is very set in stone. The only questionable thing, in my opinion, is whether you go for Ivan Toney or Erling Haaland as your third forward. But consider Crystal Palace midfielders as well. I've kind of highlighted the main options and the main teams to target for Double Gameweek 36, and it's just down to you which one or two players you go from every single one of these teams. The only team I definitely triple up on this week is Newcastle, without a shadow of a doubt, and in that case I wouldn't go for a double up in defence if you can. I think, you know, a lot of us will have that situation with our normal teams, but on a free hit I would go for a double up in attack, and I think having Isak and Wilson at the same time could be a fantastic differential for you. But thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to 300 likes. Let's keep on pushing towards 20,000 subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, channel memberships, Discord server, and the FPL League. All of that is there. I wish you all the best of luck for Double Gameweek 36 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.